Imagine this, you're at a dinner party. Soft jazz hums beneath the clink of silverware. Laughter floats above the table like steam from warm plates. You know these people, colleagues, neighbors, a childhood friend or two. They're kind, decent, the sort who help carry groceries for the elderly, who post about mental health awareness, who tear up at videos of rescued dogs. But then, someone brings up a controversial headline. A sharp silence cuts through the room like a scalpel, and suddenly, the air shifts. You hear cruelty cloaked in righteousness, dehumanization disguised as moral conviction. Fury, raw, righteous, and unrelenting, erupts from mouths you never expected. You glance around. You're surrounded by good people, but something's wrong. What happens in that moment, where goodness fractures and something else begins to leak through? What quiet machinery hums beneath civility, waiting for the right voltage to spark a transformation? What lies dormant in people who believe they're incapable of darkness? It starts small. A woman posts a heartfelt message about justice but ends it with a subtle dehumanization of an entire group. A man volunteers at a shelter by day but seethes online by night, anonymously unleashing his suppressed venom. You hear it in the soft insistence of, "They deserved it," or the confident nods when someone says, "Some people just aren't human." You wonder, were they always like this? And if so, are you? Here lies the uncomfortable paradox. Monsters aren't born in shadows, they grow in the light. They are cultivated in the soil of rightness, fed by moral superiority, watered with denial. They emerge not in dark basements or criminal dens, but in classrooms, living rooms, board meetings, church pews, social media comment threads. And most terrifying of all, they often don't know what they've become. History offers no shortage of warnings. Ordinary citizens who signed orders, nurses who sterilized patients, teachers who turned away, neighbors who stayed silent, until silence became complicity, and complicity became cruelty. These weren't anomalies. They weren't evil in the comic book sense. They were people who once believed in kindness, fairness, even love. And yet, they turned. So what is the fault line? Where does it begin to crack? What dormant virus lives inside human nature, waiting for the right ideology, fear, or tribal instinct to activate? Carl Jung once said, "The brighter the light, the darker the shadow." What we disown in ourselves, what we deny, repress, or moralize away, doesn't disappear. It festers, it mutates, and eventually, it demands expression. So perhaps the real danger is not an evil that declares itself, but an evil that wears the mask of virtue. Perhaps good people turn into monsters not despite their goodness, but because of how tightly they cling to it, how desperately they need to believe in their own purity. How many acts of destruction have been committed not out of hatred, but out of love for a cause? How many oppressions were justified in the name of order, safety, peace? You're not immune. None of us are. That's the first truth we avoid, the part that rattles the foundation of identity. Because to ask, "Could I become the monster?" is to stare into the abyss, and realize it has your fingerprints. And yet, this question is necessary, essential, because the scariest monsters are not the ones who know what they are, it's the ones who don't. So we must ask, what makes a person, good, moral, even loving, drift, step by step, toward cruelty? What societal illusions, psychological mechanisms, and philosophical delusions pave the road to hell with the very best intentions? What systems reward that transformation, while keeping us convinced we're still on the right side of history? You feel the dissonance, don't you? That hum beneath your skin, that part of you that wonders, have I already crossed a line and just didn't notice? That's where we begin, not with monsters in movies, not with evil as spectacle, but with the quiet rot under the surface of goodness. Because once you see how easily it spreads, you'll never look at good people the same again. Next, the hidden problem and its psychological/philosophical roots. Let me know when you're ready to continue. Vous avez dit, next ChatGPT a dit, Section 2, the hidden problem and its psychological/philosophical roots, approximate 950 words. Title: The Devil Hides in the Mirror. There's a reason fairy tales often place monsters outside the village, lurking in forests, hiding in caves. It's comforting, isn't it? Evil is elsewhere. Evil is obvious. Evil doesn't look like your friend, your coworker, your reflection. But Carl Jung would argue differently. He believed the shadow, the repressed, disowned part of ourselves, contains the very traits we refuse to acknowledge: aggression, envy, hatred, cruelty, lust, the hunger for domination. Not because we are evil, but because we are whole. And wholeness includes darkness. To be fully human is to wrestle with that internal wilderness. But we don't wrestle, we deny. From childhood, you're taught to be good, not wise, not whole, just good, obedient, pleasant, self-sacrificing. You are praised when you are agreeable, punished, directly or subtly, when you show anger, challenge the rules, or express taboo emotions. And so begins the construction of the false self, the persona, a carefully curated mask designed to win approval, avoid rejection, and survive. The more you invest in the mask, the more the real you, the shadow self, is buried. But it doesn't die, it waits. This is where the problem begins. Because when you suppress something long enough, it doesn't vanish, it metastasizes. And the longer it's denied, the more dangerous it becomes when it breaks through. Jung once warned, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. But our culture does the opposite. We split the world into binaries, good versus evil, hero versus villain, us versus them. We use morality like a weapon. We moralize our instincts, censor our rage, and outsource our darkness to enemies, ideologies, and strangers. This is what Nietzsche called ressentiment, a repressed emotion turned inward, then projected outward onto scapegoats. When people feel powerless, instead of confronting their weakness, they redefine it as moral superiority. They elevate themselves through condemnation of others. In his genealogy of morals, Nietzsche argued that slave morality arises when the weak begin to see their inability to act as a virtue, when meekness, fear, and passivity are rebranded as goodness, while strength, power, and instinct are condemned as evil. This kind of self-deception is not just personal, it becomes collective. Societies are built on shared illusions, shared definitions of good, but often, these definitions are not grounded in truth or integrity, they are grounded in control, order, convenience. Arthur Schopenhauer believed human behavior is not ruled by reason, but by will, a blind, insatiable drive. We imagine we are rational beings, but we are mostly creatures of desire and delusion. We rationalize after the fact. So when a person does harm in the name of good, they rarely see themselves as wrong. They are fighting the bad guys, protecting the truth, doing what must be done. This is how empathy is drained, how violence is moralized, how cruelty becomes sacred. You don't have to look far to see this at play. Cancel culture masquerading as justice. Mass surveillance excused as safety. War justified as peacekeeping. Genocide wrapped in national pride. Family abuse reframed as discipline or tough love. People need to believe they are good, and they will twist reality to preserve that self-image. Jean-Paul Sartre believed we are condemned to be free. We are responsible for our choices, but that burden is too heavy for many. So instead of confronting that freedom, they escape into bad faith, a psychological defense mechanism where one deceives oneself to avoid facing uncomfortable truths. A parent abuses their child but convinces themselves it's love. A citizen supports policies that harm others but tells themselves it's about safety. An employee betrays their values to stay silent, then rationalizes it as professionalism. We are always constructing narratives to protect our identity. But here's the twist. The more someone clings to the identity of being good, the more vicious they often become when that identity is threatened. They cannot accept fault. They cannot apologize without conditions. They cannot see nuance, because to do so would unravel their carefully crafted persona. So they double down, they justify, they demonize, and in doing so, they become what they fear, only now with moral conviction behind it. Aldous Huxley once wrote that, the surest way to work up a crusade in favor of some good cause is to promise people they will have a chance of maltreating someone. That is the hidden promise of so many noble missions, the permission to hate. And once you believe your hatred is righteous, there are no limits to the harm you can inflict. But let's pause. This isn't about them. It's about you. About how easily this process begins in your mind. When you silence that internal voice that questions your motives. When you ignore the rising resentment and call it boundaries. When you take pleasure in someone else's humiliation and call it justice. When you feel that flicker of superiority, and feed it. These aren't anomalies. They are invitations. Little doors through which your shadow steps into the light, wearing your name, your smile, your values. And you don't even notice. But others do. They feel it. And slowly, they start to reflect it back. Until the world becomes a mirror. And the monster you were so sure lived out there, is staring back at you. You think the transformation is dramatic, sudden, visible. like a light switch, on or off. But that's the illusion. In truth, monsters don't arrive with a roar. They creep. They show up in small, almost invisible ways, each one justified, rationalized, even applauded. A cold glance, a sarcastic comment, a moment of silent agreement when someone is mocked, the quiet pleasure of seeing someone you resent finally fail. And then one day, you don't flinch when cruelty is spoken aloud. One day, your empathy feels more like a burden than a virtue. One day, you're not just watching the descent, you're part of it. And the scariest part? You still believe you're one of the good ones. This is how evil takes root in normal lives, not through grand villains or dramatic acts, but through a series of micro-decisions made under the illusion of righteousness. And the consequences, though silent, are devastating. Psychologically, your brain adapts. Cognitive dissonance, the discomfort of holding conflicting beliefs, forces you to resolve the gap between your self-image and your behavior. So when you act in a way that contradicts your good person narrative, your mind edits the story. You weren't harsh, you were honest. You weren't indifferent, you were setting boundaries. You didn't betray your values, you evolved. Every distortion serves a single purpose, to protect the self from seeing its own shadow. Over time, you develop what psychologists call a moral disengagement mechanism. This is when you begin to separate your actions from your identity. You hurt, but you don't see yourself as hurtful. You manipulate, but you're just strategic. You hate, but it's justified. This isn't a bug in the human psyche, it's a feature. The brain is wired to preserve the ego, to protect the self-image, to maintain coherence. And so, your empathy erodes, not with force, but with logic. Your compassion fades, not with cruelty, but with comfort. And before long, you've built an internal fortress so strong that even truth can't enter. Socially, the damage spreads like a virus. When you suppress your shadow, it doesn't just disappear, it leaks into your tone, your relationships, your parenting, your leadership. People feel the tension beneath your smile. They sense the judgment behind your kindness. They notice the passive aggression, the condescension, the silent superiority. And they react, not to your words, but to your energy. You become harder to connect with, less trusted, more resented. But no one tells you, because you still look good. They just drift. They withdraw. They build walls. And you tell yourself it's because they changed. This is how disconnection spreads in families, friendships, societies. Not through malice, but through unacknowledged shadow. You see it in parents who control their children under the guise of protection. In activists who preach love but attack anyone who disagrees. In spiritual leaders who radiate peace but secretly hunger for power. The shadow, when unintegrated, creates spiritual arrogance, psychological fragility, a hollow kind of success, admired on the outside, but lonely within. And collectively, it's how civilizations unravel. When the majority denies its own darkness, society becomes a theater of projection. Look around. How often do people argue not to seek truth, but to win? How often are moral slogans used not to uplift, but to divide? How often does someone signal virtue, not to express value, but to gain status? This isn't accidental. This is the architecture of modern culture. In a world that prizes appearances over introspection, people are rewarded for performance, not authenticity. And performance is the perfect shield behind which the shadow thrives. Social media turns human interaction into a spectacle, every post a curated narrative, every comment a battlefield. Here, people are less interested in being good than looking good, less concerned with self-awareness than self-promotion. We live in an age where identity is currency, and the most profitable identities are the ones that appear most virtuous, most outraged, most aware, most morally unshakable. But the cost of this masquerade is immense. The more we deny our capacity for darkness, the more we empower it. We see it in mass polarization, in echo chambers where people dehumanize others without flinching, in tribalism that rewards loyalty over truth, obedience over thought. Philosopher Hannah Arendt called it the banality of evil, the idea that monstrous acts are often committed not by fanatics, but by ordinary people who blindly follow orders, hide behind bureaucracy, or refuse to think critically. Today, the banality of evil wears different clothes. It looks like apathy. It sounds like, it's not my problem. It hides behind, I'm just doing my job. It justifies itself with, they brought it on themselves. And the worst part? It's invisible to the person embodying it, because they still believe they are good. This is the final consequence. You lose the ability to see yourself clearly. And once you lose that, There is no boundary left, no mirror strong enough to reflect back what you've become, no voice inside that can whisper, stop, because the monster isn't some external invader. It's you, untethered from introspection. It's you, convinced of your own righteousness. It's you, estranged from your shadow. And the longer you stay asleep, the more the monster grows, not in secret, but in plain sight, feeding on the applause, smiling for the camera, rising to power. But not all is lost. There is a way back, a rebellion against the sleepwalk, a return to the self, not the curated version, but the true, unfiltered self, to confront the monster not with shame, but with honesty, to face what you've buried, and integrate it, transform it, reclaim it. This is where we go next. There comes a moment when the silence becomes unbearable, a subtle ache beneath the skin, a flicker of awareness in the dark corners of your mind. You realize, you've been living a performance, playing the role of who you think you should be, instead of becoming who you truly are. This moment is the beginning, not of healing, not yet, but of rebellion, not against society, not against others, but against the lie that you are purely good, the lie that your intentions absolve your impact, the lie that evil is external, foreign, unrecognizable. The rebellion begins with a single, terrifying act, facing yourself. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the integration of the shadow into the conscious personality. It is not self-improvement. It is self-confrontation. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. To reclaim the parts of you you've exiled, the rage, the lust, the hunger, the pride, the cruelty, not to act on them blindly, but to understand their source. To sit with them like old ghosts returning home. You see, you can only transform what you're willing to hold in your hands. And your shadow is begging to be held, not punished, not judged, just seen. This is not a journey for the faint of heart. It is not linear, nor glamorous. It will not earn you applause, because the first step is admitting that you're not who you thought you were, that you've lied, that you've hurt, that your goodness is conditional, that your empathy is selective, that you are capable of darkness, and always have been. And then, paradoxically, you begin to become safe, not because you are pure, but because you are aware. The truly dangerous are those who think they are incapable of harm. The truly trustworthy are those who have seen their darkness and choose, consciously, to hold it back. But how do you start? 1. Withdraw the projection. Every time you judge someone, pause. What part of you are they reflecting? What fear are they triggering? What trait are they embodying that you've buried? Projection is the ego's defense mechanism. It's easier to condemn than to confess. But confession is liberation. When you reclaim your projections, the enemy becomes a mirror, and the war becomes an invitation. Embrace contradiction. You can be kind and manipulative, compassionate and resentful, brilliant and deeply insecure. To be human is to be contradictory. There is no clean self, no fixed identity. You are a constellation of competing forces, desires, and fears. Freedom begins when you stop trying to be consistent, and start trying to be true. As Nietzsche said, you must still have chaos in yourself to give birth to a dancing star. 3. Stop seeking purity. The pursuit of purity is one of the most dangerous ideas ever sold. Religious zealots seek it, political fanatics enforce it, social movements fracture under the weight of it. But human beings are not pure, we are complex. We are not meant to be saints, we are meant to be conscious. The most enlightened souls are not those who never fall into darkness. They are the ones who know their darkness intimately, and make peace with it. Practice shadow dialogue. When anger rises, don't suppress it. Sit down, write, why are you here? Let it speak, let it rage, let it blame, let it scream, and then ask, what do you need? What are you afraid of? Behind every dark emotion is a wounded child, a neglected voice, a silenced truth. When you dialogue with your shadow, it stops screaming, because it finally feels heard. Set fire to the persona. You've spent years building the mask, polishing it, perfecting it, being the good one, the strong one, the funny one, the successful one. But masks are heavy, and no one will ever love you for who you are if you never show them. A calm rooted not in denial, but in acceptance. A dignity that comes from seeing the worst in yourself, and choosing to rise anyway. You are no longer afraid of becoming a monster, because you've already met yours. You've looked it in the eye, and you didn't run. Next, the ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. Let me know when you're ready to continue. Vous avez dit, next ChatGPT a did, Section 5, the ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization, approximate. 995 words, title, The Mirror and the Flame. What if the monster wasn't the villain? What if the parts of you you've spent a lifetime fearing were never there to destroy you, but to awaken you? You've been taught to run from darkness, to silence the anger, to numb the pain, to exile the jealousy, the arrogance, the raw, untamed hunger. But what if the very things you buried were the keys to your freedom? Imagine this, you're standing at the edge of a vast, still lake. You've spent your life skipping stones across the surface, ideas, affirmations, performances, all in the name of peace. But beneath that calm is a depth you've never dared to dive into, because that's where the monsters live. Except now, you've descended, you've seen what lurks below, and the truth is, there was no monster at all, just you, hurting, wounded, human. You were never evil, you were just unseen, by yourself. The final truth is this, the monster is not what corrupts you, the monster is what saves you, if you are brave enough to embrace it. That rage you've hidden. It's your boundary screaming to be honored, that envy you deny. It's your soul begging you to pursue your unlived potential, that arrogance you mask. It's the buried voice of a self that once believed it could be great, until it was told it wasn't enough. The monster is not evil, the monster is truth in exile, and the exile ends when you stop running. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You don't transcend your shadow, you become whole by walking straight into it, arms open, and saying, "I see you, I hear you, and I will no longer pretend you are not me." This is what it means to individuate, to stand in the middle of the storm, not trying to be good or bad, but to be real. This is not the enlightenment of gurus and golden halos. This is the enlightenment of bloody hands and trembling hearts, of truth spoken through cracked voices, of forgiveness extended inward before it's ever given outward. When you integrate the shadow, you don't become soft, you become unshakable, because you've met the darkest parts of yourself, and you didn't flinch, you didn't collapse, you chose to love what you were taught to hate, you chose to understand what you once judged, you chose to heal what you were told to hide. This is real transformation. It is not becoming better, it is becoming brave, and with that bravery comes an unexpected gift, compassion. Not the fragile, conditional kind, but the fierce, unwavering kind that sees the monster in someone else and recognizes it as kin. You no longer demonize those who lash out, you understand them, because you remember what it felt like to be at war with yourself. You stop preaching, start listening, you stop saving, start witnessing. You realize, the world doesn't need more heroes, it needs more humans, honest, integrated, present. Here's the paradox, the people who are most dangerous are not the ones who feel their darkness, it's the ones who deny it. And the people who are most powerful are not the ones who conquer others, it's the ones who have conquered their own fragmentation. Integration doesn't make you perfect, it makes you real, and realness has a gravity that no illusion can match. It grounds you, anchors you, and allows others to do the same. Because the moment you show up whole, you give others permission to do the same. And that is how healing spreads. Not through force, not through shame, but through authenticity. Think of it like this. The shadow is a locked room in your house. Inside are the parts of yourself you've disowned, your anger, your grief, your selfishness, your unmet needs. You've kept the door shut for so long, the air inside is thick. The light barely reaches it, but now you've opened it, you've stepped in, and you're not cleaning it up to impress someone. You're not repainting the walls for social media. You're simply saying, this room is part of my house, and I will no longer live here pretending it doesn't exist. That's not weakness, that's sovereignty. The world doesn't fall apart because of monsters. It falls apart because of people who are too afraid to admit they have one. But you're not afraid anymore. You've seen what you're capable of. You've accepted that your light is only as strong as your willingness to stand in darkness. And you've made a vow, not to be good, but to be true. Not to look perfect, but to be whole. That's how good people stop becoming monsters, and start becoming mirrors, reflecting the fullness of what it means to be human. Messy, contradictory, beautiful, true. So the next time you feel rage rising, the next time shame knocks at your chest, the next time envy whispers in your ear, don't run. Turn toward it. Ask it why it's here. Thank it for surviving. Hold it like a child who was never allowed to speak. Because it's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to return you to yourself. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to become whole. And wholeness is forged in the fire of contradiction. The real monster was never your darkness. The real monster was the silence that told you not to feel it. So now, you rise, not as a saint, not as a savior, but as a soul who knows itself, completely. And from that knowing, you choose, not the illusion, not the performance, but the truth. And in that truth, you are finally free.